I was sitting in the cardiac wing of Mercy Carolina Hospital at 2:30 in the morning when a pharmacist I'd never met before slid into the chair beside me, pressed a folded piece of paper into my palm, and said under her breath, "Don't open this until I walk away, and don't look at your son-in-law when you do." My wife was 3 doors down with tubes in both arms, her kidneys shutting down for reasons 4 specialists couldn't agree on, and the man this woman was warning me about was the same man who had carried Vivian to the car when her legs gave out, who had driven 90 miles an hour to get her here, who was at that very moment in the cafeteria buying coffee for the whole family and crying soft enough that the night nurse kept patting his back. I thought the pharmacist had lost her mind. Then I opened the paper, and 20 minutes later, standing in a stairwell with a detective and a laptop, I understood that the man my daughter had married in our backyard 6 years earlier had been killing the only woman I'd ever loved, 1 cup of sweet tea at a time, for almost a year. Tell me where you're watching from and what time it is where you are, because at 2:30 that morning I thought I was just a tired old husband waiting on a miracle. I had no idea I was standing at the front edge of the worst thing my family would ever live through. My name is Calvin, and at 66, I'd had the kind of life that makes a man dangerous, because comfort makes you lazy, and lazy makes you blind. I started a commercial roofing and HVAC supply company in Charlotte back when I was 28, working out of a rented bay off Statesville Road with 1 box truck and a partner who quit on me inside a year. 38 years later, I had 4 locations across the Carolinas, 90-some employees, and enough put away that I never once worried about a bill. But none of that ever mattered the way Vivian mattered. We married at 23. She was a school librarian from Rock Hill, with a laugh that turned heads in church, and a way of looking at a person that made them tell the truth before they meant to. 43 years. 2 kids raised, 4 parents buried, 100 storms weathered. She was the smartest person I ever knew, and she read people the way I read a roof. One glance and she knew where the rot was hiding. She'd started feeling poorly about 10 months before that night, nothing you could point at. She got tired in the afternoons, then she got tired in the mornings too. She'd be cooking and have to sit down halfway through. She had headaches that lived behind her eyes and a stomach that turned on her after meals. Our family doctor ran her through everything. Blood work, scans, a cardiologist, a nephrologist, even a neurologist out of the university, because her hands had started trembling. Her numbers came back wrong, but the wrongness never lined up into a name. They'd treat one thing, she'd perk up for a week, then she'd crash again. Worse than before. She lost close to 30 pounds. Her skin went a color I can only call gray. The woman who used to walk the Greenway every single morning couldn't get from the bedroom to the kitchen without holding the wall. Now here's the part I'll carry to my grave. About 2 years before any of this, our daughter married a man named Garrett, and from the start, Vivian didn't trust him. Couldn't tell you why, she'd say, but she didn't. She told me once quiet, after a Sunday dinner, "Calvin, that man watches our hands whenever we sign anything. Watch him next time. He's not looking at the food. He's looking at what we've got." I told her she was being hard on the boy. Garrett was charming. He was polished. He'd worked as a pharmaceutical sales rep for years, drove a nice car, said all the right things, called Vivian Miss V, and brought her flowers on the second Sunday of every month like clockwork. Our daughter, Camille, was 34 and head over heels, and they'd just had our grandson, Micah, who at 4 years old was the light of Vivian's whole life. I told my wife that not trusting a man for the way he looked at a dinner table wasn't fair. She let it go. She always let it go when I dug my heels in. That was the last time my wife ever tried to warn me about anything, because 8 months later she was the one in the hospital bed. Garrett and Camille had moved into the apartment over our detached garage about a year before Vivian got sick. He'd told us it was temporary. His pharmaceutical job had restructured. That was the word he used. And his next thing, some health supplement company he was building with his brother, just needed a little runway. Camille was working part-time and chasing a toddler. They needed maybe 6 months. Vivian had her doubts, but she loved her daughter and adored that baby, so we said yes. 6 months turned into a year, and somewhere in that year my wife started dying, and the man living over my garage started taking over the cooking. That's the part the police kept coming back to. About 5 months in, Garrett had insisted that Vivian needed to rest, that she shouldn't be on her feet making meals, And he'd started bringing her things. A protein shake in the morning, a tall glass of sweet tea in the afternoon, and Lord, my wife loved her sweet tea made the Carolina way syrupy enough to stand a spoon in. A mug of bone broth at night because he'd read it was good for the gut. Every single day, 3 deliveries of love carried up the back steps with a smile. Every single one of them, I'd learned, was a dose. The night it almost ended, we were all at the dinner table. Vivian took 2 bites of her plate, set her fork down, said, "I don't feel right," and went face first into her mashed potatoes. Camille screamed. I froze. And Garrett moved like a man who'd practiced. He had her on the floor, 2 fingers on her throat. Phone already dialing, telling the dispatcher her symptoms in clean clinical language while I stood there useless and shaking. The ambulance got her to Mercy, Carolina in 14 minutes. In the waiting room, he held my daughter while she sobbed, and he kept saying, "She's strong. She's gonna fight this. Ms. V is a fighter." I believed every word. I held on to that man like he was a railing on a sinking ship. The pharmacist's name was Yolanda, and the note she pressed into my hand had 4 words on it. Ask about the talfline glycol. I didn't know what that meant. I followed her out into the hallway thinking she'd made a mistake, mixed up a chart. She walked me past the nurse's station, past the vending machines, into a stairwell where the door shut heavy behind us, and she turned around and looked at me like she was about to break a law she'd thought about for hours. "Mr. Calvin, I'm not supposed to do this," she said. "I could lose my license. But I've been a hospital pharmacist for 19 years, and I have watched 2 families lose somebody to exactly this, and I am not going to stand here and watch a third." She told me Vivian's overnight labs had come back with ethylene glycol in her blood. I asked her what that was. She said, "Antifreeze. The sweet stuff people pour in their cars. In small amounts, over time, it shuts the kidneys down slow. It mimics a dozen diseases. It explains everything: the fatigue, the nausea, the weight loss, the tremors, the kidneys. Every doctor who's looked at her has been chasing the symptoms because nobody goes looking for poison in the 63-year-old grandmother." My legs went out from under me and I sat down hard on the concrete step. She crouched down in front of me. "Somebody's been giving it to her," she said, steady, "for a long time. This isn't an accident and it isn't a disease. Somebody in that woman's life has been putting it in something sweet enough to hide the taste. Sweet enough to hide the taste. The tea. God help me, the tea." "My daughter would never," I started, and Yolanda put her hand up, gentle. "I'm not telling you who," she said. "I'm telling you what, and I already called it in. There's a detective on his way down. His name's Cordell. He's worked these before, the slow ones, the family ones. You need to talk to him before you say a single word to anyone in that waiting room. Do you understand me? Not your daughter, not your son-in-law, nobody." Detective Reuben Cordell was a broad man in his 50s, with reading glasses pushed up on his forehead, and the kind of calm that comes from having seen the worst of people and deciding to stay gentle anyway. He set a laptop on a folding table in a little security office near the loading dock and turned it so I could see. The number on the screen meant nothing to me, but the way he said it did. "This level," he said, "doesn't happen by accident. Nobody touches this much antifreeze without meaning to. And the pattern in her older blood work, the labs your family doctor took months ago that nobody flagged, it's consistent. This has been going on a long time, Mr. Calvin. Somebody's been very patient." "Who?" I said. My voice didn't sound like mine. "That's what I need you to help me figure out," he said. "Who makes her food? Who handles her drinks? Who's alone with what she eats?" And I sat there in that cold little room and watched the answer assemble itself in front of me like one of my own buildings going up, beam by beam. Garrett. Garrett with the morning shake. Garrett with the afternoon tea. Garrett with the afternoon tea. Garrett with the bone broth. Garrett, who used to sell pharmaceuticals for a living and would know to the gram what a dose like that would do. Garrett, who'd performed CPR on the floor of my dining room with the steady hands of a man who already knew exactly what was wrong. "My son-in-law," I said, and saying it out loud made me want to be sick. "He took over all her food. He brings her everything. He used to work in pharmaceuticals. He'd know how much." Cordell nodded slow. "Then here's where we are. I believe you. But what I believe and what a jury convicts on are 2 different countries. A man like that, if he's smart, he's careful. We accuse him tonight, and he lawyers up. He says it was a contaminated supplement from that company he runs. He points at a leaky bottle in the garage, and a good defense attorney builds you a reasonable doubt out of nothing. And then he walks. And then he tries again, on somebody who doesn't have a pharmacist willing to risk her career in a stairwell. So what? I said. I go home and I act normal while that man poisons my wife. No, Cordell said. Your wife stays here where we can treat her and keep her safe. And you go home and you help me catch him doing it on camera. Then he doesn't walk. Then he goes away for the rest of his natural life. There was one more thing, and it was the thing that nearly broke me. Don't tell your daughter, he said. Not yet. I'm not saying she's part of it. Everything you've told me about her says she's not. But if she knows, her face will tell him, and his face is the only edge we've got. Can you carry that? Can you look at your own child and not tell her that her husband is a murderer? I thought about Vivian, gray and small, in that bed, 10 months of her life stolen one sweet glass at a time. I thought about the warning she'd given me 2 years back that I'd waved off like a man swatting a fly. Set up your cameras, I said. They kept Vivian at the hospital 5 days. The doctor started her on the antidote and put her on dialysis to scrub the poison out, and they told Garrett and Camille that Miss V had a rare autoimmune flare hitting her kidneys, that they'd caught it in time, that she'd need careful monitoring. Garrett nodded along, asked thoughtful questions, used words like creatinine and glomerular that made the young resident's eyebrows go up. He brought lilies to the room every morning. I watched him set them in the water, and I had to leave and stand in the hallway gripping a railing until my knuckles went white, because if I'd stayed, I'd have put my hands around his throat right there. On the 3rd day, Vivian was clear-eyed enough that I sent the kids down to the cafeteria and shut the door and sat on the edge of her bed and told her the truth. I watched my wife's face go through every weather there is, disbelief, then horror, then a rage so cold it scared me, and then, at the very end, a stillness like the surface of a pond. I told you, she said, not mean, just quiet and tired and right. 2 years ago, I told you that man watched our hands. You did, I said, and I told you that you were being hard on him. Vivian, I am so sorry. I should have listened. I should have always listened to you. She reached over and took my hand, and there was more strength in her grip than I expected from a woman who'd lost 1/3 of herself. Don't waste your sorry on me right now, she said. Save it, we've got a man to catch. And Calvin, she looked at me with those eyes that had read everybody we'd ever met. Keep my baby out of it. Whatever happens, that's still her husband, and she still doesn't know. Don't let this make her hate herself for loving somebody who fooled all of us. When Vivian came home, the house was a trap with the jaws already open. Cordell had a tech come out and put pinhole cameras over the kitchen. One on the counter where the pitcher of tea lived, one on the cabinet, one over the little corner by the back door where Garrett mixed her shakes. They put a quiet monitor on the home internet. And they had me hand Cordell, very casually, the half-gallon jug of sweet tea from our refrigerator so the lab could confirm what we already knew in our bones. The first 3 days, nothing. Garrett was a portrait of devotion. He carried Vivian's plate to the couch. He tucked a blanket over her legs. He sat on the floor and built block towers with Micah so she could watch and laugh. I started to wonder if I'd lost my mind. If Yolanda had been wrong, if I'd wired my own house to spy on a grieving young father. There's a special kind of cruelty in being made to doubt your own eyes, and that man was good at it. On the 4th morning, Cordell called me at 5:45. Go to your office and shut the door, he said. I'm sending you something. The kitchen camera had caught Garrett at 5:40 in the morning, before a single soul was awake. He came down in sock feet. He pulled a plastic measuring cup out from behind the dish towels, a cup nobody else in that house had ever touched. He took a jug out from under the sink, the kind you'd buy at any auto parts store, and he measured out a careful little pour into the pitcher of tea, then stirred it slow, tasted it off the back of his finger, added a touch more sugar, and put everything back exactly where it had been. He didn't rush. He didn't look around. He moved like a man following a recipe he'd made 100 times before because he had. There's more, Cordell said. We pulled his purchase history. He's been buying antifreeze with cash, a jug at a time, from gas stations across 3 counties, so it never adds up at one register. We've got him on 12 different store cameras over 9 months. And there's a phone call I need you to hear, Mr. Calvin. I'm only going to play it once, and I'm sorry. It was a call Garrett had made to his brother Dex 2 days earlier. I'll never forget the easiness in his voice. It's basically done, he said. Doctors think it's her kidneys. Once she's gone, the estate's split, and Camille's the only kid local. The trust runs through her, and I run Camille. The old man's worth 8, maybe 9 million, all in. There's a policy on top of it. I clear my debt, I clear yours, and we never touch the supplement thing again. And his brother said, "You sure Camille doesn't know?" And Garrett laughed and said, "Camille cries about her mama every night and brings me tissues. She doesn't know a thing. I'll grieve with her real pretty for a year. Then we figure out the rest." His brother said, "Man, that's ice cold." And Garrett said, "It's not cold, it's just the only math that works." I put the phone face down on my desk, and I sat there with my hands shaking so hard I knocked my coffee off the edge and never even reached for it. This man had married my daughter as a transaction. He'd moved over my garage like a soldier, setting up a forward position. He had held my grandson on his knee and fed my wife antifreeze in the same afternoon and felt nothing. Nothing at all. Cordell gave me a choice, and it was a terrible one. We had enough to arrest, but one more dose, caught clean, with the lab confirming the swap, would make the case airtight, would take away every door a lawyer might try to slip through. The whole animal in me wanted to walk across the yard and up those garage stairs and end it with my own 2 hands. But I heard Vivian's voice. "Be smart." "One more," I said. "But my wife does not drink one more drop of that tea." "She won't," Cordell said. "We'll have somebody in your kitchen before he ever comes down. We've got an officer, Delgado, who'll come every morning at 5 dressed as a county water inspector checking your lines after the neighborhood main work. He'll pull the poison pitcher and put a clean, identical one in its place before your son-in-law wakes up. Your wife drinks safe tea and pretends she's getting worse. Can she do that?" She could. God, she could. For 3 mornings, Garrett crept down at 5:40 and dosed a pitcher that had already been swapped out at 5. Vivian drank clean tea and gripped the counter and groaned and let her hand tremble on purpose. And once, this is the part that tells you everything about my wife. Garrett came down the stairs while she was at the table and said, "Miss V, you want me to bring your tea up so you don't have to sit at the table?" And my Vivian smiled at the man who was trying to murder her and said, "You're too good to me, son," and let him pour her a glass and watched him do it with the patience of a woman waiting for a trap to spring. I don't know how she did it. I'd have come apart. On the 7th day, Cordell called and said, "We have everything. 6 clean events on camera. 9 months of purchases. The lab confirms the swaps. And we have the call. This is the strongest case I've put together in 22 years. I want to make the arrest at your house tonight. Invite them to dinner. I want him relaxed, and I want to separate your daughter from him the second it happens so I can watch her face when she learns it. That'll tell me everything I need to know about whether she's a victim or a partner. I believe she's a victim. Let's prove it." That evening, Vivian cooked. First real meal she'd made in nearly a year. She moved slow, and she had to lean on the counter. But there was a fire in her eyes I hadn't seen since before all this started. Fried chicken, collards with a ham hock, mac and cheese baked with a crust on top, and a sweet potato pie cooling on the sill. "If this is the last supper I make for that man," she said, cracking pepper over the chicken harder than the chicken called for, "it's going to be the best thing he ever put in his mouth." Garrett came down all smiles, told her she looked like a new woman, told her whatever the doctors were doing was a miracle. "Something's working," Vivian said, and caught my eye across the kitchen. We sat down at the same table where she'd gone face first into the potatoes 8 days before. Micah was in his booster seat smashing mac and cheese into his face. Camille was glowing. Her mama was up. Her mama was cooking. Her mama was getting better. And Garrett poured everybody's drinks and told a funny story about a customer and complimented the collards twice. Warm and easy and present. The best father and husband and son-in-law a family could ask for. If I hadn't watched him on that camera with my own eyes, I'd have believed every second of it. That's the thing nobody tells you about evil. It doesn't look like evil. It passes the gravy and asks about your day. The doorbell rang halfway through dinner. I stood up. "I'll get it." Cordell was on my porch with 2 officers behind him. "Everybody home, Mr. Calvin, come on in, detective." Come on in, detective. Camille looked up confused when 3 officers walked into her mother's dining room. Garrett went still, not surprised, still. The kind of still a deer goes when it hears the brush move, the half second before it decides whether to run. Garrett, Cordell said, I'm going to need you to keep your hands where I can see them. And then he said the words, the charge, the attempted murder, the poisoning, the right to remain silent, and the room came apart like a dropped plate. Camille screamed. Garrett's face did something I'll never forget. For just an instant, the warmth slid off it like water off glass, and underneath there was nothing. No fear, no guilt, just a man rapidly recalculating. This is insane, he said, smooth even with cuffs going on. Camille, baby, tell them. Tell them I love your mother. And my daughter turned to me with her whole world breaking and said, Daddy, what is happening? Tell them it's a mistake. Tell them. Sit down, sweetheart, I said. There's something you have to see. Cordell pushed the plates aside and set the laptop on the table and played it. Garrett in his socks at 5:40, the cup behind the dish towels, the jug from under the sink, the careful pour, the taste off his finger. 6 separate mornings stacked one after another. Camille watched with her hand over her mouth, her eyes going from the screen to her husband and back, again and again like her mind physically could not lay the two of them on top of each other. And then Cordell played the call. It's not cold. It's just the only math that works. When his own voice said that, something left Camille's face that I don't think ever fully came back. She made a sound I'd never heard a person make. Is it true? She whispered. Garrett didn't answer. Garrett, is it true? And he looked at her, and whatever was left of the man she'd married wasn't there to look back. You don't get it, he said, flat. You grew up in this. You don't know what it's like to be the one standing outside the window. I was just taking what people like your family hand to people like you, and never to people like me. Rivian rose up out of her chair then, all 5'3" of a woman who'd been poisoned for 9 months and was still on her feet. You call killing me slow taking what's owed, she said, and her voice didn't shake at all. I fed you at this table. I held your son the night he was born. I defended you to people who saw you clearer than I did. She looked him dead in the eye. You didn't take anything. You chose. And now you'll have 30 years to sit with what you chose. The officers walked him out. He didn't look at Camille. He didn't look at his sleeping son. The front door shut, and the house went into that awful hollow quiet that comes after something happens that can never unhappen. And my daughter slid out of her chair onto the floor, and Vivian, the woman he'd tried to murder, got down on that floor with her bad knees and her ruined kidneys and pulled our daughter's head against her chest and rocked her like she was 4 years old again. How did I not know? Camille kept saying. I slept next to him. I had his baby. How did I not see it? And Vivian said into her hair, because you loved him, and love makes you blind to people who don't deserve it. That's not your sin, baby. That's your goodness. He used your goodness against you. That's on him. Every bit of it is on him. I stood there and watched my wife comfort the daughter whose husband had spent the better part of a year killing her. And I understood something about Vivian that 43 years hadn't fully taught me. Her strength was never in surviving the poison. Anybody can survive if the doctors get there in time. Her strength was in deciding, right there on the floor, that she would not let what he did turn her hard. She had every right in the world to be bitter. She put it down so she could pick our daughter up instead. The trial came 7 months later. His attorney tried the supplement story, exactly like Cordell said he would. Claimed Garrett's health company had a contaminated batch, that he'd cross-contaminated the kitchen by accident. The jury sat through 6 videos of a man measuring antifreeze into a pitcher at dawn, 9 months of cash purchases across 3 counties, and a phone call where he laid out the whole plan and laughed. It took them under 4 hours. They convicted him on attempted first-degree murder, on poisoning with intent to kill, on conspiracy. The judge gave him 30 years. No parole eligibility for 22. Camille filed for divorce the same week. She and Micah moved into a little place across town, and she didn't take a dime more than what was hers. And she went back to school to finish the social work degree she'd set down years ago. She told me she wanted to spend her life learning to spot the things she'd missed in her own house so she could see it coming for somebody else. I have never been prouder of anybody in my life. Vivian's road back was long. Antifreeze does damage that doesn't fully undo. She was on dialysis for a stretch, then off it, then watched like a hawk. The woman who used to walk 3 miles started with the distance to the mailbox and back, and most days that was a victory, but she got a little farther every week. By the next spring, she was out in her garden cussing at the squirrels and putting in tomatoes she swore would do better than last year. Our son, Andre, flew in from Houston the night of the arrest and stayed 2 weeks, and our neighbors brought food to that porch every evening for a month without being asked, and Yolanda the pharmacist came to Sunday dinner more than once. Because as far as I'm concerned, that woman is family now in a way Garrett never was for a single second. Here's what I keep coming back to, sitting on his porch. Garrett had every title there was. He had the ring, the last name, the seat at our table, the key to our garage, my grandson on his knee. None of that made him family. Family isn't a word you marry into. It's a thing you prove, every ordinary day with what you do when you think nobody's looking. My daughter driving back to that hospital every morning was family. My son on the next flight out was family. My wife getting down on the floor on ruined knees to hold the child of the man who poisoned her. That's the realest family I ever saw. Garrett was a stranger the whole time, wearing our love like a borrowed coat. And if you're out there right now and there's somebody close to you, somebody everybody else swears is wonderful, but something in your gut goes quiet and watchful every time they're in the room, listen to that. You are not crazy. You are not ungrateful. You are not paranoid. 2 years before any of this, the smartest woman I ever met told me to watch a man's hands, and I told her she was being unfair, and it nearly cost me everything I love. So I'm telling you what she'd tell you, because I almost learned it too late. You can't read what's in a person's heart, but you can watch their hands. What somebody does when they think the cameras are off, that's the only true thing they'll ever show you. Vivian's in the kitchen right now. I can smell the pie. She still burns the edges every time, and still blames me for talking to her while she's measuring. And I will thank God for that woman and her burnt crust and a pharmacist brave enough to break a rule for a stranger every single day I've got left. Now, I want to hear from you. Has somebody close to you ever set off that quiet alarm in your gut while everyone around you called them a blessing? Did you listen, or did you talk yourself out of it the way I did? Tell me in the comments, because the story you share might be the warning that saves a life. And if any part of this reached you tonight, do me a kindness. Subscribe to Voices of Uncle Vincent. Share this with somebody who needs to hear it. And remember what my Vivian always says. Take care of the people who actually take care of you, and keep your eyes on everybody's hands. 2 years before any of this, Vivian told me to watch Garrett's hands whenever we signed something at that dinner table, and I told her she was being unfair to a good young man. I think about that almost every morning now. She saw it clean and early, the way she saw everything, and I waved it off because the truth she handed me was uncomfortable and I wanted to keep things easy. That choice didn't cost me a thing the day I made it. It cost me nearly everything 9 months later, when my wife was gray in a hospital bed and a stranger had to risk her career in a stairwell to tell me what the woman beside me had already known. Nothing in this life arrives out of nowhere. The collapse at the table was just the day the bill finally came due on 100 small moments I'd refused to look at. What I learned too late to be proud of it is that loving someone isn't the same as protecting them. Love made Camille bring her husband tissues while he planned her mother's funeral. Love made me defend a man my wife had already read. The thing that actually saves people isn't the size of your heart. It's the clearness of your eyes. The willingness to look straight at a hard fact and not flinch. To ask the second question when the first answer goes down too smooth. Garrett counted on all of us being too kind to be sharp. He read our decency as a blind spot and built his whole plan inside it. But here's the part I hold on to. When Garrett got what was coming to him, he had nothing left underneath the performance. No spine, no center, just a man who traded his whole character for math that didn't even work. And Vivian, poisoned for the better part of a year, got down on a kitchen floor on ruined knees to hold the daughter of the man who tried to kill her. That's the difference between them. And that's the difference I want you to carry out of here. One of them chose to become hollow. The other chose, in the worst hour of her life, to stay whole. So watch the hands, ask the second question, and when the person who loves you most says something quiet and uneasy about somebody everyone else adores, Don't talk yourself out of it the way I did. But more than any of that, decide now what kind of person you'll be when something tries to break you, because that decision gets made long before the test arrives. Stay good when good is harder. Stay clear-eyed when comfort begs you to look away. And when life knocks you down to the floor, choose to be the one who reaches up and pulls somebody else along with you.